One of the hardest things to accept is that you can genuinely be trying your best and still end up becoming the villain in someone else's story. Today's episode is all about how assumptions, projection, boundaries, and growth can completely change the way that people perceive you, even when your intentions have always been good and genuine. The point of this episode isn't to point fingers, it's not to expose anyone. It's about to talk about what it feels like to realize a few things. One, that people created versions of you in their own head. Some people only like the version of you that they benefited from. And once you stop performing, you become difficult, cold, dramatic. Again, because these people, whoever it is, met you at a certain point of your life. And maybe you were going through something, and that's okay. But today's episode is going to dive into why you may have become the villain in someone's story, even though you can't find a reason as to why that happened.
Just a friendly reminder, I'm not a therapist, psychologist, or expert in human behavior. This is a judgment-free, assumption-checking zone. Take what resonates and leave the rest.
If it bothers you when people misunderstand you, it bothers me too. And trust me, I spent so much time trying to prevent misunderstandings from happening, and it was honestly exhausting. I wouldn't do it again. So let's dive into this conversation so you understand maybe a little bit better about why I'm okay with it if people misunderstand who I am. No one sees the entire story. And that's something that is very important to keep in your mind. So everyone witnesses different chapters of you. Some people come into your life after chapters have happened. Some people are there the entire time. And some people are just there for bits and pieces. And you don't necessarily have control over that. Think about the last time you met someone new and now they're in your life. They weren't here to actually see or witness anything that had happened before because they weren't in your life yet. So these are some things that, first of all, we can't control. There are some people who met you when you're thriving. Again, I'm laughing because I can already think about different people as I say this. Some people met you when you were struggling. Some people only saw your reaction to certain events. They never saw what caused your reaction to certain events. And some people only know the version of events that they had benefit from. And that's very important too. I did talk about that actually in a recent social media post. That was one of my She's Probably posts recently. If you think of yourself like a book, there are people who will judge the entire book just based off of one chapter. So if someone, I'm just going to throw a random number out there, if someone met me when I was 22, they walked in on my life in chapter 22. They were not there for all the chapters before. So in that moment, they're judging me and my entire life just based on that one chapter. And I've always found personally, it helps to take myself out of the picture and kind of think of it from a different perspective. Let's dive into why it's impossible to control the stories that people tell about you. You know I love assumptions, so this is going to be me going through some assumptions that are from the, I don't know, the dark webs of the internet. If she left, she must not have tried to make it work. Again, I just think that that comes from a place where people weren't there to see the whole story. Not everyone knows the whole story. Something that was personal for me a while ago was that people started, and I've said this before in other episodes, rumors about me. And like, keep in mind, this led to like a huge life-changing event for me because I couldn't take it anymore with all of the BS that was going around. There was a third party, however you want to call it, who basically started coming at me for stuff that I didn't even know that I supposedly did, because newsflash, I never did it. I never said it. But she basically looked at me and said, oh, well, that's your version of the truth. And it's like, okay, well, it is the truth. And again, like, that's someone who assumed that I left and I didn't try to make anything work. But this person wasn't there for the situation that happened. This person wasn't there to see what had actually happened to me and what had actually been said to me and how the situation went down. So she was left with the side of the people who are no longer in my life for good reason. And my take on that is good riddance, because that's not the energy that I would ever want in my life. I would never want to look at someone and be the person who kind of puts someone down and says, well, that's your version of the truth. Like, no, I'm not going to stoop down to that level, because that's not the kind of person that I am. So again, people made assumptions about why I left. And at this point, I don't even care why people think that I walked away from that situation. It has literally nothing to do with where I want to be in my life anymore. And it's honestly still one of the best decisions I have ever made. So pat myself on the back for that, because that was stressful, but I moved on and I have been thriving ever since. If she went quiet, she must not care anymore. I feel like that can go a few ways, because sometimes it's out of exhaustion. Like, it's just, you're so tired of explaining yourself that what's the point anymore? So I could understand how people could take that as she doesn't care. But again, I think part of it also depends on who's actually saying this. If she didn't explain it, she must be wrong. I feel like this is totally related to, you know, when you say no, you don't have to explain why you said no. There are people who are always going to wonder why you said no, and they're always going to expect an explanation from you. But personally, I believe that you don't owe an explanation to anyone. If she moved on quickly, she must not have been affected. I don't think that that's true at all, because from, again, personal experience, I know that sometimes it can look like people have moved on quickly, but maybe they're still seeing a therapist and you know nothing about that. Maybe they still cry behind closed doors and you know nothing about that. I don't think that everyone just moves on quickly without having feelings behind whatever they're moving on from. And again, I think that that's also something that's just, if you're not someone where this person feels comfortable sharing this with you, you're not someone who really has the right to be making assumptions about the situation. Because if this person trusted you, they would probably be coming to you and you would actually know what was happening, instead of being the one sitting on the outside making assumptions. I feel like I kind of did a mic drop with that one. If she reacted emotionally, she must be unstable. I really don't like that one. There's nothing wrong with feeling your feelings and expressing your feelings. I personally feel really bad when I don't have a good cry after like a certain amount of time, because I feel like it's just good to kind of let everything out every now and then. But I don't think that reacting emotionally means that the person is unstable in all cases. I think that sometimes what triggered the reaction needs to be studied more. I just think that every action has a reaction. And, I learned that very, I would say, at a young age in science class, but it applies to everything. I even talk about it in dancing. Every action you do has a reaction. So people focus so much on the reaction, they don't go to the part about the action and looking at what caused the reaction. Anyway, moving on before I go off on a tangent. If she succeeded after leaving, she must have been ungrateful before. Absolutely fucking not. And I can tell you that 100%. Like, no way. Absolutely not. That is not the case. And again, personal experience, I'm thriving right now because the situation I was in, I didn't have the same opportunities that I made for myself now. End of story. It has nothing to do with being ungrateful. Absolutely nothing. If she didn't tell her side, there must not be another side. Again, from a personal experience, I just think that there are always people who will be committed to misunderstanding you because it's you. Not because you did anything wrong, not because you owe these people anything. There are just some people who will always turn their nose or have something to say or have judgment to pass simply because it's you. And it's exhausting. I got so exhausted trying to explain myself to the wrong people. So I blocked those people and I don't want anything to do with them ever again. Truly. My life is so much better without them. So, yeah, I feel like some people just get tired of explaining themselves to people who are just always going to find something wrong with them or something wrong with their story or just basically be there to pass judgment and cause drama. Okay, to close out our assumptions, people rarely label the whole story. They just label the moment that they witnessed. Or sometimes people label moments that they had nothing to do with. They just feel like joining in on the drama. So watch out for them too. When you only see fragments, you don't actually know the whole truth of what happened. So I would personally be always careful to pass assumptions and pass judgment because you don't actually know what's going on. You just fill it in with what makes the most sense to you. So if you are someone where you know that people have made assumptions about you and you think about what those assumptions were, for some reason, no matter how crazy it sounds, that's what made sense to that person in the moment when they made that assumption about you. It might be wild. I have no idea. I mean, some of mine were pretty wild, and I'm just like, oh, that's a shame for you to have that mindset in your life. That's so negative. But as my best friend's mom says, not my circus, not my monkeys. So I am definitely not going to try to do a deep dive into the people who hurt me because that is a waste of my time. But for yourself and for me, I mean, first of all, since starting this podcast, my whole perception of assumptions and people making assumptions and why we make assumptions and how quickly people are to come to assumptions has completely changed. And I try to make sure that I don't do the same anymore because I did realize that I was making assumptions about situations and about people. And this has kind of also opened my eye as a learning experience as well. Some thoughts. People don't misread you accidentally. They misread the parts that they had access to. Silence gets misinterpreted more than intention. You're not always misunderstood for who you are. Sometimes you're misunderstood for what people didn't see. Moving on to becoming the villain. I don't know, guys. I'm definitely the villain in people's story. And, if that makes it easier for them to move on with their lives, then fine. Whatever. I really don't care. Again, I pour my energy into so many other projects that are so much bigger and carry so much more weight than these shitty opinions and shitty assumptions about me. It really just doesn't matter anymore. And some people will tell you that I'm very much in an I don't give a fuck era. And it's not that there's no fucks given because I care a lot. I truly do care a lot. But I learned the hard way about where I should put my energy and where I should put my time and where I should put my focus. So that's what I could say on that. A lot of times when you become, quote, the villain in someone else's story, it can be from disappointing people, changing, leaving dynamics or changing dynamics, setting boundaries, speaking up, no longer shrinking yourself, and also realizing that certain relationships were dependent on your silence. And all of those are things that maybe you made these decisions for you, for the best. I mean, for me, I was very much a yes person. I have said this before. And then I started saying no, and wow, did the tables turn. And some of these people have tried to reconnect, and they do realize that they're talking to a completely different person now, because I learned my value and I learned about my strengths. I worked really hard on what my weaknesses were there, and one of them was people pleasing. So when you make decisions that are meant for you, I mean, in my personal experience, I had to deal with a lot of nonsense when I started making decisions that were going to be the best for me and what I wanted in my life. I read this quote somewhere about, when you have a decision to make, is this going to benefit where I see myself in the future? And that was something that I tend to think about. So let's discuss some things in addition that lean towards why maybe someone chose to make you the villain in their story. So one, it could be who you used to be. I can completely say that I completely changed so many times. I've reinvented myself. I have changed some of my values. I have made sure that I was stubborn with some of my morals, and I didn't fall into peer pressure anymore. Because I admit that sometimes, I kind of say it as like a South Park era. I don't really watch South Park anymore because it brings me back to a time in my life that I wasn't being myself. And there were jokes that were being made in an environment that I was in. I literally realized that that was how I could fit in, because that was like the type of humor, and those were like the jokes that were flying around. And I am like embarrassed to say that I participated in it, because that's not who I am, and I don't watch it anymore. And yeah, I have a sense of humor, but I now know that there is like a clear boundary. Like there is a limit and there is a line. And for me, I have made that line like 20 times thicker, and I'm not ever going down that path again, just to fit in with people who turned out to be shitty anyway. Most of them are blocked. I have used my block button a lot more often. And who you used to be, those people are going to judge me based on that. Those people aren't even going to take the time to realize how much change I've made. And they're not even going to consider for 1 second that I literally want nothing to do with them anymore, because they're going to just continue to think how amazing they are. So yeah, that's like a version of who I was during a brief period of my life where I was literally at rock bottom, and I didn't know how far down I was at rock bottom, if we say it that way. I didn't really realize until recently, like, how bad it was and how bad I was doing mentally, physically, emotionally. This is also one of the reasons why I kind of don't care so much anymore, because I've made decisions now based on who I want to be. There are things that I'm just not going to do anymore, whether that's TV shows, like I'm not going to watch them anymore, or whether that's having conversation with certain people, or whether when I sense that peer pressure is starting, I just immediately walk away instead of participating. There are so many more things that I'm aware of now. Next up is what you tolerated. There's probably some behavior that you tolerated that absolutely not. You won't do that anymore. 100% yes. Sitting back and realizing that people were getting made fun of and I didn't step in and say anything. Like, no, not anymore. Absolutely not. And I think that's also why I get so defensive when I teach children ballroom dancing. I do not allow, I say mean girl energy because it's mostly girls in the class. Like, I do not allow mean girl energy into my classroom. The second that they start with their teenage drama, none in my classroom. And again, I think that that comes from me just like being in a situation where, and I say like in the moment, I don't know. It's hard, I think, to look back and realize that you sat there and didn't say anything. But yeah, I feel like I need to say I'm sorry, because those are things that I don't budge on now. So again, I will ask someone to step out of the classroom and not come back in until they're ready to be a team player. But that's not something I'm going to tolerate anymore. It's like mean girl energy, or just people being mean to each other. Because in my past, it wasn't kids, it was grown adults acting like worse than children, just being mean to each other. Number 3 is what changed internally, right? So now we're talking about the shift where you realized that maybe you were worth more. Maybe you wanted to experience different experiences, right? So now we're moving into a completely different phase. Number 4 is what happened and how people reacted to the change. So again, action, reaction. Your action was maybe realizing you were worth more. What were people's reaction to that? Because in my case, it was so negative, but every situation is going to be different. So it would be, how did people react to you choosing yourself, or whatever the situation might be? And then number 5 is what you learned. I have learned so much. It's insane how much I have learned from going through a bad situation. And, people tend to say that, there's like, I don't think I remember the exact phrase, something about like there's light at the end of the tunnel. I did not believe that until we're sitting here like, I don't even know, 5 years later, 6 years later, I'm not really sure. And then I'm like, wow, I learned so much from that terrible situation. Some things for framing this situation, right, about becoming the villain in people's story. It's not talking about, okay, well, here's what they did, right? So if you're making someone the villain in your story, right, here's what they did. Like, that's not going to be helpful, because that just sounds like it's starting down a tunnel that's going to be very negative. So the focus is, here's how I changed, here's what I accepted, here's what I ignored, and here's what I learned. It's completely different when you kind of personally take yourself out of the situation and then focus on reflection. It has helped me. That's all I can personally say about that. A little reflection on this. Some people don't miss you. Some people miss the access they had to you. Women are also referred to as being mean, and a few other select words, the second they stop being convenient. Not everyone who's upset with you has actually been mistreated by you. And I realized that I was trying harder to be understood than I was trying to understand myself. And of course, this episode's not complete if we don't dive in quickly to letting people misunderstand you. So it's not needing to defend yourself to anyone, releasing the need to control the perception of you. And that was something that I had to do. If I didn't do it, I'd probably still be stewing on that situation today, which would just be like an absolute mindfuck. Ugh. Protecting your peace instead of your image, because the real people are going to know who you are. The real people are going to start to realize, like, okay, well, something's not right here. Silly example. Something happened in paperwork that I did the other day. And someone called me and was like, oh, can you explain what happened? Because when so-and-so found this mistake, I immediately jumped in and said, oh, that's not like her. She wouldn't do something like that. And that was 100% correct. The app malfunctioned and it did not save everything that I wrote in. So again, kind of a completely like non-emotional example, but sometimes that's what we need. So the real people know you, the real people understand you, and real people know how you operate. So if someone makes up a crazy rumor about me, first of all, I have like 5 close friends. If it's not one of them speaking, I can guarantee you 100% it's a rumor, because I don't really talk to anybody else on a regular basis. So there you go. How maturity sometimes looks quiet. I've learned that, in situations where there's drama, like, I'm not going to talk. I'm just going to sit there, because if it has nothing to do with me and I don't really even know what the situation is, I'm not going to get involved. Or sometimes if someone's just coming at me with something, it's best for me to just look and go, okay, I don't know what you want me to do about it. So again, I would take that on personal experience based on maturity and choosing not to get involved. And accepting that closure doesn't always come through explanation. You might get an explanation and it still might not really explain anything to you. Because again, based on your perception, it still might not make sense. I've talked before about how there's a situation I never got an explanation to, and I could easily be sitting here making assumptions about different aspects of what happened, but where's that going to get me other than me just overthinking everything? So I just kind of had to accept it at face value for what it was. I know that there's a part of me that truly wants everyone to understand my heart and how genuine I am and the effort that I truly put in every day. But again, I've learned that I can't let that come across to everyone because there's going to be people who just aren't going to listen. There are people who are going to hear what I'm saying, but not actually care. And at the end of the day, you know who you are, your people know who you are, and that's truly what matters because those are the people that you want around you anyway. I would rather have my 5 really close friends than be trying to get the attention of 500 strangers every day. And it's because I lived through that. A few takeaways on this portion. Peace and being fully understood rarely occur at the same time. Some chapters of your life will sound unbelievable to the people who have met the new version of you. Healing sometimes looks like being less explainable. Some questions for reflection for this episode. Where are you still performing in your life? Who are you trying to convince? What version of yourself are you afraid to let go of? And are you trying to be understood or are you trying to avoid rejection? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of She's Probably Talking to Other Guys. Follow along on social media at SPTTOG Podcast. Make sure to hit the follow button on whichever platform you are tuning in on because I truly appreciate your support. And stay tuned because I have a lineup of guests over the next few months that is going to be absolutely incredible. I'm really excited to have been chatting with them and to be chatting with some of them within the next few weeks. And I truly can't wait for you to hear their stories and get to know them. Until next time.